And we're live. Welcome back to the Royal Academy Book Club, The Art of Learning. This week, discussing Chapter 3, Two Approaches to Learning. Been a good couple of weeks or something since we've actually been able to get together and do this. It feels good to finally get back to it. So, the chapter begins with him kind of setting up the premise, and quote kind of captures that. He says, two questions arise. First, what is the difference that allows some to fit into that narrow window at the top? He's talking about, like peak performers, right? And second, what is the point? Right? If ambition spells probable disappointment, why pursue excellence? In my opinion, the answer to both questions lies in a well-thought-out approach that inspires resilience, the ability to make connections between diverse pursuits, and day-to-day enjoyment of the process. And I kind of want to sit down and let's talk about each of these kind of points that he's taking here, and see how we've applied those in our own work and each of these, right? So he talks about resilience, right? The ability to make connections between diverse pursuits and day-to-day enjoyment of the process, right? And he's arguing that these three are what make it worth it. So to me, I don't know, it's like the idea of resilience kind of harkens back to if you're super frustrated and down all the time, have a bad mental game, then that's going to make it tough to both to do it and to see any point doing it, right? The second being the ability to make connections between diverse pursuits. I think that's that kind of speaks to what you can get out of it, right? One of the things that I always talk about with Learning League, right, is that it's not necessarily about learning. I mean, it definitely is, right? But the life skills that you learn along the way that apply in all sorts of different things, right, whether you continue to play League or not, are going to be useful and worthwhile and good to have. And finally, if you just literally enjoy doing the act of pursuing excellence, then it's its own reward, right? Doing what you enjoy. So I actually think this is kind of a pretty nice, succinct kind of summary of why do this at all. You guys think?
Yeah, I can't disagree. When people ask me why I what do I get out of playing a game for so long, what I say is just it makes me who I am. Not as it doesn't make me a League of Legends player, but it made me it put me through challenges that forced me to change and to grow up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Same here. So yeah, I don't know. I think the thing that we often lose sight of, or at least I know that I lose sight of, is that third one, right? Enjoyment of the day-to-day process.
Yep.
It can be tough. It can be tough to really structure your day in a way that both encourages you to grow and to pursue mastery, but also to actually So I think that might be one of the things that I ought to look back on, kind of do. Actually, you know what this reminds me of? A while ago, I was watching Day 9, right? And he was talking about how do you achieve something? It's literally the same topic, right? He was somebody asked him in his chat, and they were like, "I want to be a federal investigator, but I literally have to be a detective for 10 years before I can even apply to do that, and I'm 3 years in. How am I gonna, you know what I mean?" And he talked about a number of different things, including something that I have taken so seriously to heart. I feel like it's just worth it. So he talks about, you know, you want to set yourself different lengths of goals: long-term goals, medium-term goals, and short. And he says you basically have the long-term goal figured out, right? Like you have some kind of an idea of where you want to be. But then the medium-term goals is more like a month-to-month sort of, right? How do you set those, or how do you about staying busy at that level?
That's what we've been asking for a while.
Yeah, right. You know, so you know, of course, the same old stuff kind of, you know, comes through, right? It's things like, you know, try to break down your long-term goal into steps and try and figure out what your next step has to be, and that's one way to kind of get your medium. But he says too, he uses a metaphor. He says, imagine that you are making like a pot of popcorn, okay? And imagine that you take and you put the oil into the pan, then you reach into the jar with like fingers, and you pick out one kernel, gently place that into the pan, and then you sit there and like you are going to figuratively and literally starve. Okay, put in a bunch of kernels, start a bunch of different projects, throw out a ton of different applications, start a whole bunch of different stuff, and some of it's gonna pop, some of it isn't gonna pop, and that's okay, right? Like that's normal, right? Just like scattershot everything you can think of into the pan, and be ready for any of it to pop, and pursue the things that do, and don't pursue the things that don't.
But what about putting the biggest, most massive kernel and making sure it cooks perfectly?
That reminds me of
that's deliberate practice.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure, true, fair enough. But at the same time, I'll refer to the story that was at the end of, I believe it was an article at CycloneLink, and it was this story about two pottery apprentices, and the one pottery apprentice is told, okay, I'm going to give you a week to make the absolute perfect pot, okay, but you only get one shot. And then they tell the second student, I care absolutely not at all how well they are. I just want you to make as many pots as you possibly can. Okay? And at the end of the week, not only has the second student made infinitely more pots than the first student, but their final pot is way, way, way better than the pot first student slaved away. It's like the moral of the story is make pots. Make lots of pots.
Isn't that super scuffed as an analogy or metaphor or whatever?
How so?
Because we're talking about the metaphor where making pots like is the key to become better at making pots. Like it's the thing they have to do to improve.
Yeah.
So making one pot is not gonna. Yeah, he's not. He will try super hard on making one pot. Mm-hmm. But my point wasn't to like do only one thing, but it is to do the biggest thing and make sure you do it right.
By doing it a lot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course. But it's like, okay, so maybe I get your first.
Like I think the metaphor doesn't quite hold up, right? You know, it's like it isn't one giant kernel that you work really hard at. It's you want a perfect piece of popcorn, so you're going to throw a lot in there.
All right, maybe I think I just understood your analogy with the popcorns wrong. I was thinking that the popcorns were like the project of the skills you were developing.
Yeah, no, I mean it can be, okay, or it can also not be, right? I mean, it's like it depends on what your goal is, right? And so for this person, right, who wanted to be a federal investigator, right, all of the kernels, all of the like little projects and side things and all of that should be related to that long goal, right? Like you want to be a federal investigator, build the skills that you need to get there. But let's say there's like 4 different jobs that you could get, a project you could start, and a book you could read. Don't sit there and say, okay, I think the second job is the most important thing to do, and then just like focus all of your attention on that, and then if it fails, then you've got nothing. Instead of doing that, apply for all 4 jobs, do a chapter of the book a week, and like, you get what I'm saying, right? Like you want to put many different kernels in the fire at once, so that, you know, because the thing is, right, like you never know what's going to work and what's not going to work, right? Especially with job applications. You actually have no idea what's going to happen. So the best approach is not, it's like, recognize when the best approach is not to select the most important thing, but rather to just put effort towards a lot of varied things. And another underrated part of focusing on multiple things at once, I think, is that it is more enjoyable, interesting. And so, even if, you know, I mean, like, let's take League of Legends skills for example. If you pick like 4 or 5 skills to work on throughout a month, and you make your goal to get all of them to like 75 to 80% competency, I think that's going to be a lot more valuable than picking one skill and working that to 95%. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
So that's, I think part of the thing. So yeah, that's one way to make the process more enjoyable. It's one way to make. Goes my train of thought. Go back to my home. Or, but I know you've been
understandable. Have a nice day.
I know you've been a big proponent of working on multiple things at once.
Mm-hmm.
So, was there any like research that you came to do that? Did you just kind of come to that through trial and error? How did you? Because
I came to it because I find it boring to work on one thing at a time.
Fair enough, right? Yeah, it's like.
Plus, I mean, I guess there are studies on interleaving practice and such where it's like, if you practice 3 different things at a time, yes, it's harder at first because you have to focus on 3 different things, but studies show that you actually learn it faster and better by switching up things. Mm-hmm. Like if you're practicing throwing a ball instead of just always throwing it 10 feet, if you practice 5 feet and 15 feet random times, like maybe you pull 10, 15, 5 feet out of a hat and you practice each one. Each one requires a slightly different aim, so once you can get all 3, then you can do them all better that way because you're
that's
building different brain circuits.
I feel like I need to find a way to like figure out how to put that into practice. Like I've never practiced that way. Not at all. I feel like it's probably worth investigating. Just don't even start from
what I do is I choose 5 things and I choose one and then just like do one at a game. Yeah. One per game or one per like 2 or 3 games and then just change on a whim. Just whenever I feel like I want to change and I just change it.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose that's probably why I don't climb as fast, but when I get something down, it's down like perfectly.
I wonder if there's probably almost certainly something to do with size of the pool too. It's like whether you're interleaving between 2, 3, 4, or 5 things. I imagine would be some kind of. I think it also probably depends on how similar the skills are, right? Because it's like for me, 100%.
For me, it's like when I think about it, it's like probably better for me to like. The way I do it is like I do completely different skills, but where it's like maybe it's probably better to like be like, hey, I'm going to practice spacing. I ought to practice spacing from max distance, from no distance, and from medium distance, or something like that. Rather than be like, I'm going to work on spacing, then I'm going to work on CSing, right? Stuff like that, rather than.
And I think another really elegant way to do that, I think, is to do it on multiple champions, right? If you practice spacing on Caitlyn, then on Lucian, then on Twitch, then on Raven, then on Ballista, it's like you're getting totally different requirements for your spacing every time, even though the general theme is always the same, and that's kind of point.
Which would make sense as to why when I practice those things when I play with my friends, I get a lot better at them a lot faster than when I'm just playing solo queue on Twitch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would make sense. Sure.
But the only time I play non-Twitch is basically when I'm playing with friends. Right now.
So the second kind of main quote here talks about Dr. Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck, so cool, coolest person ever. Read the book. So Dr. Carol Dweck, a leading researcher in the field of developmental psychology, makes the distinction between entity and incremental theories of intelligence. Children who are entity theorists, that is, kids who have been influenced by their parents and teachers to think in this manner, are prone to use language like, I'm smart at this, and to attribute their success or failure to an ingrained and unalterable level of ability. They see their overall intelligence or skill level at a certain discipline to be a fixed entity, a thing that cannot evolve. Incremental theorists, who have picked up a different modality of, let's call them learning theorists, are more prone to describe their results with sentences like, I got it because I worked very hard at it, or I should have tried harder. A child with learning theory of intelligence tends to sense that with hard work, difficult material can be grasped. Step by step, incrementally, the novice can become. So, clearly I think this is like one of the most important points in all of mentality, right? It's like, this is basically like, do you or do you not believe that learning is possible, right? And, you know, if you don't believe that learning is possible, things are rough. Things are really rough. So, is there anything to say here other than like, yeah, this is really important? What do you got?
I just got yes. So that's it.
Understandable. So, throughout he continues to kind of talk about learning and entity, right? And you know, it very much mirrors the Carol Dweck graphic that I've posted in the library and that we've times, right? The idea that learning theorists tend to rise to the level of the game. They have a mastery-oriented response. They say things like, oh, now I'm gonna really have to try hard, right? They aren't fazed by setbacks, and they tend to embrace challenge, right? Whereas entity theorists tend to be more brittle and prone to quit. They have a learned helplessness orientation. When things don't go well, they just haven't got a clue what to do. They say things like, I'm not smart enough for this when they're challenged. They tend to get their confidence shaken with every single setback. They tend to avoid challenge. And as a result, learning theorists tend to both they tend to do a better job at that day-to-day enjoyment of the process, right? And they also tend to actually make it further into their disciplines. They tend to understand the work that they need to do. Another really kind of short quote in the middle here was, he says, the key to pursuing excellence is to embrace an organic, long-term learning process and not to live in a shell of static safety. This very much echoes the same sorts of things that we heard speak about the importance of getting outside your. If you're never trying to do things that you can't do, then
you'll never be able to do things that you can do.
Yeah, you'll never be able to learn to do things that you can't do. Failure is a necessary part of the process. He goes on to say, in the long run, painful losses may prove much more valuable than wins. Those who are armed with a healthy attitude and are able to draw wisdom from every experience, quote good or quote bad, are the ones who make it down the road. They're also the ones who are happier along the way. Of course, the real challenge is to stay in range of this long-term perspective when you're under fire and hurting in the middle. This may be our biggest hurdle, is at the core of the art of. And this really resonates strongly with me, right? Like, part of what I really love about this book, right, is that he, while presenting like the ideal mentality, he isn't afraid to be like, yeah, but it's like really hard to think that way. You know what I mean? Like, I find it very comforting that he kind of acknowledges the struggle of it. Like, in a way, it kind of gives you permission to struggle. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yep.
yeah, like, you know, you can learn from everything, but like, but bruh, it sucks to lose. Like, you know, that's like normal.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That's his point.
Good guy.
What matters is that when it sucks, it's you use that to keep you going.
Is that a burning on hatred kind of idea there? I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
Sorry, come again?
Is that like advocating for like a kind of like use your hatred to fuel you? Yes, feel the rage kind of an idea, or am I misinterpreting that?
No, I use it that way.
Interesting. And how have you found that works for you? I'll share that for me, I tend to like, you know, that'll like fuel me for about like 3 minutes, essentially until like the like adrenaline wears off, and then I'm back to just being sad. It doesn't tend to be super long lasting for me. You find that?
See, that's where I have a secret weapon.
Okay.
That's my secret. I'm always angry.
Okay. Understand.
That's not 100% a joke, but I also have been using anger to fuel me throughout several things in my life, and I just keep it going. You know, like if I'm angry about something, it's not like the anger doesn't stay for very long, but the energy that it gives, it stays for a while. And also, I have a very specific set of musics that I use to keep it going for even longer.
Right, that's true. Music as an emotional manipulation tool, powerful thing.
Oh yeah, I use it a lot.
I know for me, I tend to, when I was playing really hard, when I am playing, trying to focus, I tend to almost exclusively listen to like, and I feel like that for me, that does like a really good job of putting me in a flow state, because it's high tempo, which kind of ups my like mental APM, but it's also tonally a lot more laid back and a lot more relaxed, seventh chords, that kind of stuff, right? And it's it kind of lets me stay a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more than something like if I listen to like really angry music, I found myself tunnel visioning way too hard, like all the time, and that's I think what steered away. I find that like liquid drum and bass sort of acts like audio caffeine. That's kind of the way I would describe it.
Yeah, for me it's metal.
Yeah, and for just, metal, it's more like chugging a Red Bull, I feel like. But
yeah, but
I don't know. Yeah, to each their own.
Right? I like yeah exactly. When I walk down the street and you see me bobbing my head enthusiastically, then actually what's blaring in my ears is like Die Artist Murder, and it's absolutely not but it's like it doesn't have the same. Yeah, I've gotten used to it. I don't know, like tamed it. I don't know how you want to put that, but it's and it ends up being what works for me. Even when I'm not particularly angry, it still uses the residual anger that's always there.
What do you listen to music while you play? I feel like I haven't heard you talking about.
I do sometimes.
What genres do you tend to pick? And have you
Baroque
noticed
classical
any
music.
have you noticed any impact on the way that you play when you're listening or not listening or listening to different stuff?
I find that listening lets me go into a nice flow, but I also don't always want to be in the flow. I also need to be learning and stuff too, so I try not to. Depends on what my goal is.
Interesting. That's a kind of a good point. If I'm focusing on something, I find the music distracting more than helpful too. So yeah, actually, I kind of had never made that connection before. Actually, that like you're kind of trying to grind out and perform. It's probably better to listen to music, and if you're not, learn something. It's really cool.
I will sometimes if I'm not in a good mood and I still want to play or something, though, because sometimes the music puts me in a better mood. But other than that, it really depends on what my goal is.
For sure. So he starts to talk a little bit more about how he actually, what sorts of things he actually worked on in practice with his chess teacher. So he says, once he had won my confidence, Bruce began our study with a barren chessboard. We took on positions of reduced complexity and clear principles. Our first focus was king and pawn against king, just 3 pieces on the table. Over time, I gained an excellent intuitive feel for the power of the king and the subtlety of the pawn. I learned the principle of opposition, hidden potency of empty space, the idea of, and I always mispronounce this, so correct me please, Zugzwang? Wang?
Zugzwang, I think.
Zugzwang?
Yeah.
Zug.
Zugzug. Understandable. Zugzug. The idea of Zugzug, which is putting your opponent in a position where any move that he makes will destroy his. And I've thought actually, I'll just break in the middle of the quote. I've thought a lot about like, is there an equivalent of that in a real-time game? Where like any move you make is like the act of you making the move. But I don't know that there really is, because so much of it relies on that idea of like a turn. You're forced to take an action, whichever, and the ability to not take an action would be beneficial. Instead, you have to take one. All of your options. Like,
I mean, that happens in league sometimes. I mean, like, take an example of like. I mean, when you consider macro play, it almost is like a turn-based game, because it's like you push in your waves, you get a chance to do something on the map. They push in their waves, they gotta do something on the map. But if you push in your wave, and like you have Baron control or something, then if they go and top and bot or whatever and try to push the wave, then you take Baron. It's pretty much they have no good choices out of that.
mm-hmm.
Whereas like if I go bot lane, I get my resources and my gold and EXP, but then I lose Baron. But if I don't go bot lane, I lose my turret and the gold and EXP, but maybe get a chance at maybe getting Baron. You know what I mean? Something like that.
No, and like for a long time, that's kind of what I compared it to as well, is that kind of idea of like, you know, you're between like a rock and a hard place, right? Where there's like 2 different things you need to be defending at once, and you can't really do it. So you just have to choose which punch to the gut you're gonna take, right? But I feel like that's probably actually a little bit different than this, which is more like whichever move you make, you aren't under any threat now, but if you make any move, then you are under threat. You know what I mean? It's like, the fact of the matter is that in League, at least when we're thinking about it in terms of like positioning, right? You have the option to stay still. You have the option to essentially to wait, right? And so
yeah,
I feel like having the option to wait kind of negates the idea of a Zugzug even occurring. So, but certainly, yeah, I mean, like 2-pronged attacks, 100%.
I mean, truthfully though, like in a situation like that, especially when you're weaker, you'd rather not do anything and just wait, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
so like, I see it applying still.
I'm not sure I understand what you just said.
I mean, when you think about it, right? When you're behind, the ideal play is generally to wait and try to get caught up, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if they have a huge wave pushing bot lane, and they have threat on Baron, you can't just sit there and wait. No matter what you do, you have to make a move.
Oh, so you're saying, like, if you lose the Baron, you will lose the game, but you can't contest the Baron.
What I'm saying is that in a situation like that, the losing team would rather not have to deal with them taking Baron. Would rather not to deal with them taking Baron while you have to push bot. They'd rather just wait and say, "Hey, we'll just scale up. It's fine." But the fact that they're going to do Baron means that you can no longer wait and let them scale.
Yeah.
Scale up. You have to make a response one way or the other, and that's why I think it works.
I guess for me, the way that I would think of like. Again, I feel like it doesn't exist in League, but this is what it would look like if it did exist, right? It would be like, we know that the correct thing in a lot of cases is to sit there, do nothing, scale up, right? And let's say that you can do that, right? But let's say that the rules of the game stated that you couldn't do that. Waiting was not an option. You always had to be going aggressive in at least one lane at once. Or like you literally just lost the game arbitrarily, right? Like that would then create a situation where Zugzwang could occur, I feel like. Because then you're put in a position where if you go aggressive in any of the lanes, you'll lose. And you don't have the option of doing it. But the option to do nothing, I feel like, makes it so that Zugzwang doesn't exist. But maybe I don't know. It's like
I mean, I don't know.
It's an esoteric. Either way, to continue on, he talks about layer by layer, we built up my knowledge and my understanding of how to transform axioms into fuel for creative insight. I want to kind of sit on that for a second. So that's a kind of an interesting idea, right? So how to transform axioms into insight. So this would be something along the lines of like, you hand somebody a fundamental, and then from that they like derive how it's used, something else. Like I don't know, like this is it sounds like there's something interesting here, but I haven't actually thought that deeply about it. What are your initial thoughts on this? Do you feel like you've ever done this? Taken an axiom and used that to fuel some kind of creative?
Yes. Oh, actually, yeah, recently. I've had the shift in mindset about more efficiency in my jungling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like that can be taken as an axiom, right?
Sure.
More or less.
Maximize your own income.
Maximize your own income as the driving force behind the plays, the decisions you make.
Mm-hmm.
And I've played like with this in mind and like as the leading factor for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I played more with it, I got more subtlety. It allowed me to see that this was a decision that I could make and go away from it willingly, knowing that I had a better option.
That's kind of abstract. Can you give even a contrived example?
Yeah, just any situation where I could full clear and instead opt not to, and because I've spent the time like learning what the consequences are for full clearing, I know exactly what I can make the decision not to full clear much better. If that makes sense.
Oh, actually, this is something that I intended to teach people like several years ago in my coaching. Like, I don't know whether you ever experienced it or not. I don't know whether for your time, but at one point I had like a a curriculum that started with everybody learns how to play Master Yi, and everybody learns how to Power Farm the jungle first, right? And that was supposed to kind of be the idea, was that like through learning what you can do by just maximizing, just by clear, you can then start to evaluate the value of your ganks and your and all the other plays that you do kind of against that as a baseline. So yeah, that's like really cool. Kind of come to that as eventually ended up kind of moving away from it because it seemed to go against Matt Thornton's principle of teach things in the order you want them to arise on the mat. Right? Because
I mean, I think it does it, but like the thing is that League is like, you know, you don't get gold advantages in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? You don't
True.
You don't get to like
True.
hit somebody for 500 gold, go back and get a plate of armor, and then come back and be like, all right, dude.
I really like that idea. You like land a good punch. Both contestants like disengage, brush themselves off. The one guy gets like gets a fucking battle axe, and then they come back in and they like reassume the position, and then they're like, okay, go. That would be pretty amusing, actually. Kind of like that.
I mean, but like that in mind, it's like maybe we can't use Matt Thornton's idea to teach League. Maybe we have to, you know, go a little bit different.
Yeah, I wonder
Sure, we have to.
like what's the principle at work that makes that a good idea, and does it still apply in that situation? Because when we think about, you know, teach things in the order that they arise on the mat, and teach things in the order that you want them to rise as habits, I think there's some merit to that, but I don't know.
No, I'm not saying that we discard it completely. I'm saying that like well, maybe it's better. Maybe it's better to instead of being like you learn Master Yi in full clear, now it's you learn whatever champion you want in full clear, or like 3 champions in full clear that are different styles. So that's So that way, instead, because like the problem that you would describe was like, well, they became really good Master Yi players. They couldn't play anything else. The solution is maybe not to play less Master Yi. Maybe the solution is just to add 2 more different styles of champions.
Yeah, the difficulty came in the transition. It's like, when do you stop full clearing and start teaching how to do it? And the thing that I essentially came to is just like people learned how to full clear so well that became kind of their first habit, and they never really properly transitioned away from that into a more
so maybe then like maybe it's like you only teach full clear as like the baseline, and then like within 3 or 4 games, instead of setting up a habit, like spend 100 games full clearing, right? Maybe it's full clear and practice tool, but when you're in real games, don't default to full clear. Just literally just you know, try to force gank, see what works and doesn't.
Because like I kind of went the full opposite direction. Like, all right, now we're gonna teach people to jump by teaching them only how to gank, and farm efficiency is a bad word, and we don't.
Play Camille and Talia Lemao.
Yeah, play Camille and Talia and just like go ham, right?
No, but
that.
Yeah, I've been also like, you know, I've been playing Mundo as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you've been playing.
And Mundo is all about invading because you can't do anything else. The champion is just bad at ganking, and so I've been. It's basically doing the same thing, you know. Focus on
at that point, maybe it's better to just be like, all right, you're gonna have 3 champions. One's an gank only champion, one's a farm only champion, and one's an in between champion. Good luck.
Yeah, you play each for 100 game, and then you play a champion that can play all 3 roles, and you ascend to a superior level of play. Absolutely.
That I think the idea of like limiting the number of games that's allowed style is a really smart idea. Go back to that idea and try it again.
Well, because you have to consider our money, right? Because that guy's like really good at full clearing. He struggles with a lot of other things. That's because you know he spent so long only full clearing. Yeah. But like when you look at him play jungle, like when he makes things work, he just goes. He's like level 17, everyone's like level 14. Like, so if we can get him to the point where like he can make those things work more often, the guy's going to be an actual monster.
That's what I keep saying. That's what I keep thinking. And yeah, I definitely I like the idea of like a hard limit.
Or maybe it's just like maybe you practice full clearing and practice tool with 3 champions, and then just go into games and just let it be fluid. Just like I don't know, like
yeah, I'd say it's really different. But anyway, I just like talking about this got me into the idea that maybe you can like actually learn how to jungle by playing like by doing that. You learn how to play farm heavy, you learn how to play gank heavy, and then you learn how to play champions that are really good at diving. And then after that you mix all of them.
I feel.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of the way I'm thinking about it. It's like it's probably better. When you think about learning principles, it's probably better to isolate them as much as possible and then pull them together, right?
Mm-hmm. I feel like the other style of jungling that doesn't get talked about is like a more invade-centric, control-centric style of jungling, where it's not that you're power farming your own jungle and things in between.
Yeah, I forgot.
And it's not that you're chain ganking and picking up camps in between.
It's your power farming their jungle.
It's that you're always in the river, you're always finding them, shooing them off their own camps, putting vision down in their jungle, killing them in their own jungle, and just removing them from them, right? With prio from your lane. So kind of the key thing that like to be.
I mean, and that's funny. I feel like when I see Halo players smurfing a lot, I feel like that's sort of what they're doing. It's less that they're ganking for their laners and stuff. It's just they're literally making it so the enemy jungler doesn't get to play the game.
Yeah, and so I remember distinctly a period in my development. Discovered Xin Zhao for the first time. It was like, oh, I can literally just get level 2 and then walk into their jungle and kill them every single game. And like I just did that for like 30 games, and like it forced me, because that was the goal that I set for myself, it forced me to learn how to jungle track, it forced me to pay attention to my lanes when I was invading, and my just like awareness of the game state went so much higher up as a result of it. I felt like that was a really valuable piece of learning. So
yeah,
I think the way that I used to think about teaching, never actually put somebody through all of the courses because I never finished with the first learn how to clear, right? But the ideal was I was going to be having people play like Master Yi to learn how to farm. Then I was going to have people learn how to invade second. And I'm not sure which makes more sense, whether to like invade or to gank. And I feel like maybe invading is third. I feel like ganking is probably second.
I think ganking is second, yeah.
Because like
actually, ganking is first, farming is second. Right now it's ganking is first, farming is second. No, never mind. No, farming stays first. No. Yeah. I'll take that back.
It's tough, right? Because like you would think, right?
I mean, because an ideal jungler can do all three, right? But like, if you want to look for a thing that's like the most consistent rock, that's going to get you the most bang for your buck, it's probably going to be the consistent camp farming more than the ganks. Because the ganks are never going to be 100 to 0, right? Where it's like 100%, like you're going to get golden EXP. Whereas the camp you're always going to get golden EXP no matter what.
Yeah, but right now the camps are worth so little. Yes. As like farming, like if you're able to farm, you'll be consistently at the same amount of gold every time.
Yeah.
And XP, like you're guaranteed to follow a power curve that's like not, I don't want to say optimal, but like
stable.
Stable and decently high. Yeah. Right.
You're never gonna get ran over. Right.
Exactly.
Like the other junglers, like all over the place. So I have had games where I'm like chugging along with the good full clear and then making a gank or two. Then the other jungler is like 6 levels ahead because he ganks like 4 lanes.
Yeah, exactly.
And like has like level 12 and I'm like level 9 and I'm like,
and I feel
hey,
like
poking my grump.
Another thing that I think is really tough to teach is that what ganks you can do changes pretty dramatically with. Okay, you know what? I'm going to bring it back actually to Clausewitz. When we talk about positioning, right? And we talk about, how do you position and the whole idea of like offensive and defense. The idea is that you're supposed to like play defensively first, and then once you've kind of accrued enough of a lead to do stuff, then you do stuff. I feel like it's the same way, right? I feel like playing defensively is the same thing as farming. Like you're just accruing a lead until the point where you're now able to do stuff, right? But then as soon as you can do stuff, it is then better to do stuff, right? If you can, if you're choosing between a gank that works and farm that works, you always choose the gank. It's way more valuable, but it's riskier because it's harder, and you need to already have a certain level of power.
Remember, the very first two principles of Class Versus Warfare is you gotta take risk, gotta balance that risk with your safety. Where it's like, if you're playing defensively, then that's better for preserving yourself, because because if you're in a static war position where you're fighting off people, staying in the same spot's always better because you know the terrain better, you have less space to go, whatever, right, et cetera, et cetera. But in order to break open the lead and break open the war, you have to go on the offensive. You have to say, it's a 70-30 chance that I win this. If I don't, that's okay. I can find other spots, but I need to take this risk or else we'll never win.
The thing that I've yes, right? You need to find ways to gank in order to win the game. But if there isn't a gank that's there, it's better to farm than to gank. And
100%, because like I said, it's about balancing that risk with safety, where it's like, if the risk is so high that the chances are you're going to lose it and then lose your footing, you're going to have to go back into defensive warfare in a worse position, it's better just to keep farming and keep your position.
So I feel like that's one of the most important skills that a jungler can have, is knowing when to farm versus when to gank versus when to, right? And I think the thing though that really kind of was wrong in my thinking
described the entire jungle. The most important skill a jungler can have is just everything he's supposed to do in the jungle.
Yeah. No, it's deciding what to do. It's just like a laner's most important things is being able to lane properly. It's literally the same.
It sounds really contrived and dumb, but it's actually true. Funny enough.
It's trivially
effectively. You have to jungle effectively.
The jungler's most important skill is his ability to take decisions, as opposed to his ability to make outplays.
Yeah,
I think that's true.
But I think a laner's most important skill is in the same vein, where it's there's less decisions to make, but I feel like the decisions that they do make are more impactful, and that when it comes to wave management and then sort of things like that, where it's in my experience as a laner, I can actually completely neutralize the jungle effectiveness on my map just by wave managing properly, just by understanding that if the jungler's on my side, I just keep the wave on my side. He pretty much can't gank me unless it's a hacker that's super fat or something.
Yeah.
At least would like to have a word with you.
So the real interesting thing that I kind of realized though about ganks is that when we talk about ganks, a lot of the time we talk about I feel like there's two kinds of ganks, right? There's ganks that you can do whether your laner participates or not. You know what I mean? There are certain ganks that are so free, right? The enemy is low and overextended, where it's just you always take that, right? That always works. You don't need coordination to set it up. But then there are other ganks that you do need coordination to set up. Your laner has to do a certain thing, otherwise either the gank doesn't work or maybe even you die, right? You actually end up putting them further behind, and it's really terrible, right? And in a lot of ways it's the same sort of thing with supports and AD carries in bottom lane, right? It's there are certain plays as the support that you'll always go for whether your AD carry is nearby or not, right? It's just always a good trade. And same thing with AD carry, right? Whether your support's nearby or not. There's some turrets that are just always good, right? But then a lot of the time there's this kind of middle ground where it's well, we need to work together or else it doesn't. And I feel like when you start talking about gank-centric jungle, too often what people run into is they start watching high elo junglers, they start seeing coordinated ganks work, and then they start trying to do that in their elo and they don't work, and now what do?
Oh yeah, they're trying to do a level 3 dive they saw like Yankos do it in like fucking challenge or something. Yeah,
and it's just like that doesn't work here. You can't expect your team to follow up on that, you know. So like, it's a
that is a
stupid
problem
skill.
that I see
It's a
with a lot of
stupid annoying
Genesis,
skill,
like-
but like knowing what your team is like, knowing what your team knows how to follow up on and what they don't know how to follow up on is a skill. And it's an annoying skill, but it's a really necessary one.
I think that you're absolutely right there, where it's like, and that's sort of the thing that I've been thinking about a lot more, and I think that's why I'm starting to see more success, is that I'm starting to realize that, like, before it was always, man, this would work if my support would play properly, where it's like, now it's just like, I'm not going to fucking do anything unless I can do it by myself. I'm just, fuck you guys, I'm just sitting there.
Right?
And then what happens is I go from being 4-9 to like 11-2, and then hard carrying games without trying, right?
And that's a very different thing than being totally passive and never trading, right? It's like if you include just those ganks and just those trades that work whether your team follows up or not, that makes a huge difference. It's like such a game breaking thing.
It's just true. Because, I mean, because even in like at least in Plat, and I'm sure even back when I was in like mid diamond Elo, it was just like there were so many opportunities to take free trade that they didn't realize they were giving up.
Yeah,
Because
no,
players at that level
that's
don't
true.
punish them for those mistakes, right? So it's like they make those mistakes, you punish them and kill them, and then they come back and make that same mistake again because they don't know any better, right?
Yeah, in solo queue, playing only for the plays that cannot fail is like a solid way to go about it.
And two, I think another kind of concept that I keep coming back to is this idea that like you don't get better at forcing coordinated plays as you get better. I mean, you do. Like that's not like the major thing that helps you win solo queue, right? The thing that helps you win solo queue is you start to realize what situations are free that you didn't think were free. You start to get better at playing your solo kills, and that actually gives you more access to.
Like, remember that time, going back to that point where it's like, you were watching that replay, and then I was against the Pike Kaiser or something, and my Gianna was off warding, and I was standing in the wave, and you're like, dude, you're so fucking dead, and I walk out with a double kill.
Yeah. No, I remember that.
And I was like, no, that was entirely free. Like, Pike can't do anything to me because he missed his stun. Literally nothing they can do.
And that's exactly the sort of thing that I'm talking about, right? It's like, you have like a different level of understanding of Twitch than I do, and so plays that I look at and I'm like, there's nothing here, I'll definitely die if I go for this. You're like, no, it's free. you play it and it's free. And it's like, okay, cool, right? It's like that's what it means to get better, right? It's not that you get better at forcing coordinated plays to work. It's that more uncoordinated plays are recognized by you as your skill increases.
Yeah, and we've had the example of when you report review me on Kha'Zix and you're like, you don't kill him there, and I'm like, of course I do.
Yeah. Yeah, same thing. Exactly the same thing. And then you go and you kill him, and we're like, I guess you do kill him there. I guess this is why I'm a coach and not a player. XD. Anyway.
But it's also really pointing me back to Saber's coaching, which I used to really follow like almost religiously.
Yeah.
And then I was like, but I don't really like it because he seems to be really passive as a player. He doesn't really seem to do much.
Yeah.
But then it's like,
that's how you win.
Now at the same point, I'm like, the guy literally does nothing, but he ends up being 7-0 in plat games, right? Where it's like, okay, well.
And like gets
and then when you think about the simple model that he has, where it's like. Each champion has one or two things that if they miss, they literally can't kill you, given that things are relatively even, right?
Yeah.
It's like, if you're standing in a minion wave and Pike misses a dash, he can't kill you because he'll never be able to hook you because in the minion wave, just fucking kill him, right? And then, like, playing to the point where, like, I think this is what I'm going to take away from this, is playing to the point where it literally does not matter how you execute, you still can't lose. I think that's the point that you want to try to aim for.
How did we end up here?
We were talking about understanding how to transform axioms into fuel for creative insight. And
I have no idea how we ended up here.
From there, we went to you talking about learning to take more income as a jungler, and then that started us talking about jungle styles, and then that brought us to here. Because we talked about how ganking.
Right. We talked about ganks.
Yeah. Right. So I think the thing though, right, when we talk about like what order you want thing to be applied in as habits is a very different thing than what frequency you want applied as habits. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I'm not sure.
So let me put it this way, right? I would rather that somebody default to farming than default to ganking, right?
Oh,
If they
yeah,
don't know what to do, I would rather that they farm than gank, right? But that doesn't mean that I want them to be farming the majority of the time, right? And that's I think the most difficult thing about trying to figure out what order to teach things in, right? Because
So it's like you teach them to farm while looking for free ganks. I guess that's what I would. That's how kind of like what I'm taking from this.
That's precisely it, right? Like that would be what I want your default state to be. Is I want you to farm on default, but always be having an eye out for ganks. And if you see one, you should take it. Abandon the farm, go take the gank. But like, if no ganks
but it has to be one that like no matter how you execute it, you win because like they've hung themselves so hard that they can't do anything. Like I'm a Twitch with 12 HP, no flash, and pushing a wave, something like that.
Yeah. And then I think this works really well because then if you then move on and you say, okay, from there, you know, how do we factor invading into things? It's if you can't gank, but you're still strong and you can kill the enemy jungler and your lanes have prio, right? If the reason that you can't gank is because your lanes are winning and they're pushing in, invading is the way that you now push your lead harder than just farming.
Or even going for dives. Like,
yeah, dives too.
I mean, but with dives, you have to be strong enough that it doesn't matter what they do, right? Which is pretty hard to be.
Yeah, generally you need to be already quite fed to make dives no interaction required sort of a thing. And there's different levels of like no interaction required too, you know what I mean? It's like there are some things that you can expect certainly those to follow up on, and if they don't, that's just fine and you just take that, and that's like a positive EV even if it doesn't work every time. Like there's stuff like that too, but that's getting more and more and more and more. But I kind of like the idea of returning to that model of like teach people to farm, then teach people how to take free ganks, then teach people how to invade, and potentially after that teach them.
Well, and then like teach them more and more like different factors of what makes a free gank, because like a challenger to a challenger, a free gank could be a lot different than a gold player, right?
Oh, 100%, always. Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, challenger player is going to just hit the Lee Sin Q. You know what I mean? He doesn't have to ward hop in; he just hits it.
But like even then, it's like it could even be as far as like they hit the wave once 3 minutes before that. They're like, I'm just gonna head top after this clear, and then they're gonna be pushed in because that's how lanes work.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like so much of what you can do in terms of like lane matchup analysis and trying to predict what's going to happen just immediately gets thrown out the window the instant that you come into solo queue, because somebody will be in a position to get a perfect freeze and to choke their lane opponent out, and they'll just like, herder, I'm gonna push instead. You know, it's like it is
that even happens in Challenger too. Yeah.
Unbelievably impossible to guess what people are going to do with their wave on NA. It is actually impossible to predict what people will do. It's a mess. So
even in like mid Challenger, I've noticed that people like AD carries routinely mess up their wave management, and I'm like, this is ridiculous.
It's really pretty interesting. And some of it, I imagine, is them making decisions on a higher level than we understand. But same time,
I
kind of don't get it. Like, it doesn't make that much sense.
I mean, when you think about it, it's like there's literally no good outcome in a lot of those situations because you're pushing and now you're setting yourself up to get fucked.
All I'm
saying
like,
I think that they're like autopiloting. Like, I think they know better. I think they just fuck up because they're not fully focused.
True. Certainly the case that challengers make mistakes. No joke about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yes, it appears that all of us have done this, transforming axioms into fields for creative insight. And in a lot of ways, I actually feel like that's why working on the curriculum is so fun, and so productive, right? It's like, we spend time thinking about these axioms, being like, okay, but like, actually, what are the axioms, right? It very often will lead to new ideas about how we should. I think this is a really, really important part. It's constantly trying to refine these mental models and figure out what the axioms are. Because if you know what the axioms are, thinking about them.
you remember 3 months ago that we could have never come up with these because we were like,
Yes.
this game's too complicated.
Yes.
There's nothing. It's impossible.
Yes.
But now we're like, no, this is literally so simple.
Yes.
Literally just these 3 things. Let's go
No,
to
the game
show
is
you how
insane.
much work we've done.
As is it Steve Jobs? I think it's a lot of work to make something simple.
Yeah, 100%.
That's we're going through that process now. We're black
And
belting
we're
together.
We're a lot further along than I ever thought we would be.
To continue the quote, he says, then we turned to rook endings, bishop endings, knight endings, spending hundreds of hours as I turned 7 and 8 years old. 7 and 8 years old! Holy shit. Exploring the operating principles behind positions that I might never see again. This method of study gave me a feeling for the beautiful subtleties of each piece, because in relatively clear-cut positions, I could focus on what was essential. I was also gradually internalizing a marvelous methodology of learning, the play between knowledge, intuition. From both educational and technical perspectives, I learned from the foundation up. So, any thoughts on that passage?
I mean, that's sort of really kind of the way I like to think about chess too, where it's like, it kind of doesn't matter what a whole board does if you don't understand why we put the rooks on the sides, or why we put the bishops where we put them, or why center control the thing, or why the king is strong in the late game, right? Like, none of that matters if, like none of that helps you in the early game unless you actually, like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, if you just play chess to play chess and you don't know those underlying principles, you're never going to be good. But you can't get good without knowing those underlying principles without focusing first on the end game, because that's the way the game's at its simplest, right? It's almost like
It's the
almost
best
like
way
you
to
have
isolate
to-
in chess.
right, exactly. And I think that there's something similar in League. The problem in League is like there's 140 pieces, right? Not like 7.
Yeah, no kidding. And
So it's like,
and the simplest position comes in the early game, not in the late game.
right. Or if that's why we understand the game. That's why I think most like really good coaches try to teach the game through mid lane if they're not a jungler. Because mid lane is by far the simplest. It's 1v1.
Mhm.
You know, and it lets you impact the whole map. It's like controlling the center. It really lets you deal with all the major concepts all at once. Whereas like with
Mhm.
bot lane, it's like, for me, I can't really play mid very well because I'm so used to playing with the support, right?
Mhm.
And in top lane, it's like you don't have all the gank paths and stuff. You don't have to cognitively
Mhm.
be so aware of where everything is.
And with 80k,
I mean, that's
too,
true in
like,
bot lane too.
you think about like how trading works as like a duo. Every trading pattern that you're going to get in bottom lane is like a subset of the interactions that you can take in mid lane. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Mhm.
you never get more interactions. And weirdly enough, right? The fact that there are 2 people there and that they protect each other generally means that it's always going to be harder to trade, not easier.
Right.
Which is
But
like
it also means that the
so
trades that you
underrated.
do get seem to be so much more impactful too, because it's like, in a lot of cases where like if I get a free trade on like a Caitlyn or something, the lane's just over from there because I can just do whatever the
It's
fuck I want,
literally
right?
doomed. Yeah. Because
Or
being
like in
even a
mid
little bit
lane,
low is
because
just-
it's like
Yeah.
it feels like it doesn't matter if I get good trades or not because they have such an easy way back to get to the lane, and wave management isn't as big there because the lane's shorter. So it's like it feels like you have a lot more room to make mistakes in mid lane than you do in bot or top.
At the same time, as the game kind of gets a little bit later into the game, you know, especially if you're getting stuff like assassins and control mages in mid lane, burst is so much higher that it can be a lot twitchier. Come
Yeah,
into the late
true.
game. So the impact of trades in bottom lane, I feel like, goes down the later the lane goes, and I feel like
Yeah.
in mid lane it goes up. You know what I mean?
That's
and that's
sort
like
of- that's
weird.
sort
It
of the
like
way I
starts
feel
really
about it, too.
impactful, and then it goes down, and then in mid lane starts kind of not that important, and then gets more and more and more.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on that, especially because as the supports level up and we get their spells and get their sustain and what have you, it becomes a lot harder to make something happen because you have to wait for them to use their abilities or whatever, right?
Yeah, their
But in
defender's
mid
advantage
lane,
gets a lot
it's like
stronger.
by the time you get your 2 items, and if they don't have their 2 items, they're just completely crushed for the rest of the game until they get the 2 items.
So
I definitely agree with you on that. But it's also, I think, why if I were to go back, I'd probably learn the mid first instead of AD carry.
okay. So he says, most of my rivals, on the other hand, began by studying opening variations. At first thought, it seemed logical for a novice to study positions that he or she will see all the time at the outside of the games. But once you start with chess openings, there's no way out. Lifetimes can be spent memorizing and keeping up with the involving Encyclopedia of Chess Openings, ECO. They are an addiction. Perilous psychological effect. For children who focus early on openings, chess becomes about results. Period. Doesn't matter how well you played, or if you concentrated well, or if you were brave. Chess becomes one-dimensional, winning and winning fast. According to him, focusing on openings develops an entity theory. It becomes more about like facts and less about concepts.
I have an interesting parallel for League. It's for the jungle again. It's the way you like you learn different paths and you just learn what the paths are, but not the reasons behind them. You know. And the paths are going to change with the patches, you know, and in the same way as the ECO is going to change all the time. And so you're going to learn how to do early paths and like
and that's really it, isn't it?
And I mean, you think about it too. It's like there's so many people who go there and be like, "What's the best path? Clear path." And they're like, you need to clear."
It's like so much the wrong question,
right? And it's like now that you think about it, like that's not what the question you should be asking. The question you should be asking, why is that the best path, right?
But people don't know how to do that.
Instead, they just go and they're like, some challenger players said this was the best path for Xin on this patch.
With champions too, right? It's not, it's not learn what the different classes do and when you should pick them and how to maintain a champion pool. It's what is the best champion, and then you're just
what is the best champion to get the gold?
That's not a question.
That's so funny.
That's the wrong question. Yeah. No, I've seen the same sorts of things, and I wonder though, is it that entity theory tends to gravitate towards that because they don't see memorization as learning, or is it that focusing on the memorization by definition kind of inhibits? Because another thing that I will say, right, is I feel like openings aren't really useless to know, and especially when you look at like the highest levels of play, pre-planned level 1s and like pre-planned 1 through 6 kind of full map coordinated plays are part of the game. That's like actually a really important part of prepping for individual matches. But
I think that the difference is that
second.
The way that I'm getting it is like Josh Whiteskin. He's like, the openings come out of the principles of chess, right? It's not the other way around.
Yeah,
and
that's really a good way to put it.
And so if you only learn the openings and not the reason why they're made, you're going to be like stuck in the entity model because you're going to learn like more things, but like you're going to like just walk along the surface and never like you're gonna know
if you know
things.
But
and not why they make sense, and not what they're useful for, etc., etc.
If you know the best way to use the rook in the end game, then you know how to best use your rook in the early game because you know what the end goal of the rook is, right? And then from that points out to being like, what are the best openings? Well, it's king's pawn if you're white most of the time, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Because of these principles that we learned in the end game.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be something similar in League where it's like, the reason we take these level 1s is because of what they let me do in the laning phase, right?
No, 100% is always. Why do we invade level 1? It's to either get first blood, which gives us an advantage because we're gonna get to base for an extra item, or it's to get vision down so that I can now track the enemy jungler, and now it's easier for my jungle to make plays and for us to avoid the plays that he's gonna make.
Mm-hmm.
All of it is about how it flows into the rest of the game.
Now, imagine being a gold player who watches a pro player and sees the invade, but doesn't know why they do that. Now they just start trying it and they fail half the time. They're
Invade
like, well, this is
every
fucking
game.
dumb.
This is the
Right.
best strategy. Follow it to the letter.
Yeah.
It's not good.
To be fair, it's not wrong.
Yeah, all right, Mr. Entity Theory over there with your invade top lane every single game strategy.
I mean,
All right.
that stuff works. What can you say?
It's
People are lazy.
You use it until it doesn't work anymore, right?
Precisely.
I mean, people are going to stay lazy, so I don't care.
What if you end up fighting against Faker in solo queue and then it doesn't work?
Then it won't have the. It works 9 times out of 10. I take these odds.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, no, like that's what I'm saying, right? It's like solo queue is like a different game. Like until the
Yeah.
level of the entire solo queue field progresses to the point where that's no longer a positive EV
Where,
action.
like, if everybody you're focusing against is Faker, then
if
it's
everyone
okay
is
to do it.
faker, then you don't do it anymore. But until that point happens, until the majority of the time it doesn't work, you're gonna keep doing it. Anyway, we've arrived at our very last quote of the chapter. He says, many kids with entity theory of intelligence are quite talented. So they excel at first because of good genes, but then they hit a roadblock. As chess struggles become more intense and opponents put up serious resistance, they start to lose interest in the game. They try to avoid challenges, but eventually the real world finds them. Confidence is fragile. Losing is always a crisis instead of an opportunity. If they were a winner because they won, this new losing must make them. I feel like that last sentence, like what an impactful one. Losing is always a crisis instead of an opportunity for them. If they were a winner because they won, this new losing must make them a loser. It's kind of crazy stuff.
It feels like the fourth or fifth part of a mental hand history, or like, well, I considered I considered myself a winner because I won, and now I lose, so I must be a loser, and that's why it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
If I won because I'm smart, if I lose, that means I'm dumb, which is like super logical, but also like really.
Yeah, it comes back to, do you believe that it's entity theory of intelligence, right? It's like literally that is what creates the problem in losing. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I guess it creates some of the problem.
I wager for most people it's most of the problem. I mean, because like if most people saw losing as a valuable thing, then they wouldn't get mad with losing. It's just the truth of it, right? The problem is most people see losing as an attack against their
Literally, it's an attack
humanness
against
or-
their identity. Because their identity is their intelligence, and their intelligence is static. So, lose their identity. Yeah.
I sort of
So,
I think that's a really good quote.
takeaways? What are we thinking here? I'll start, actually. I know what my takeaway is. My takeaway, 100%,
Same. I know what you're gonna say.
the process of learning the jungle
Yep,
from
that's
the
mine as
farm,
well.
to gank, to invade, isn't actually that bad. And we should revisit it with the notion in mind that you want to focus during the ganking section on ganks that you can do by yourself, and that knowing what those are is hard. Right? It's like I one of the things that I kind of encourage people to do is just like gank every time for your first 20 games, and that'll give you a really great idea of what ganks work and what ganks don't. You know what I mean? It's like that's how you isolate. It sucks because you lose like so many of those games. You figure it out pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's mine.
I think I have two takeaways. I think one is that maybe we need to not rely on Matt Thornton's ideas so much because, I mean, at the core of things, League of Legends is not BJJ. you don't get gold advantages of BJJ, right? And I think that was a really good way of like being like these are probably a good foundation,
Mhm.
but I think we're trying too hard to align philosophies in a situation where philosophies can't align.
Hmm.
And I also think that my other takeaway is that the idea of just sometimes being creative is just waiting for them to put themselves in a spot where you can't lose. And then going from there, and I think that's something that like I would revisit every once in a while and get decent at like doing, but then would never get to the point of habit. But like maybe getting back to that sort of idea of like maybe I need to just only wait until I know I win 100% of the time to win in solo queue. Whereas right now I think I'm maybe taking too many big risks to try to get super far ahead.
Yeah.
And those are my two big takeaways.
Yeah, I think I want to revisit the idea of Matt Thornton's stuff because I want to. I feel like it's important to do our due diligence on it, right? We want to not take it totally at face value and just say that because it applies in BJJ it must apply. But I also don't think we want to say that they're obviously we don't want to say that they're totally different and that there's nothing to be taken away from the idea.
I mean that wasn't what I was trying to say, but
I know it wasn't. Yeah, I agree. That's something that we need to look back at and really kind of question the validity of this particular. Anyway, that was fun. We should do it again next week. Hey. So thanks for coming out, guys, and see you later.
Later.
Bye.